Hey everybody, my name is Christian Talbot. I am the president of the Middle States Association, and I want to share my moonshot for AI in education that I'm calling Expeditions for Everyone. And it may sound a little strange, but I want to start by telling you a story about teenagers and substance abuse. So, last November, my colleague Nicole Grimes and I spent a day at Greensboro Day School, and we asked a group of students to identify social impact challenges that matter to them and then to work in teams to design solutions. Now, one team was preoccupied with the rising levels of substance abuse among their peers, and it didn't take them long to find data to verify that there is, in fact, a crisis in the wider Greensboro region. At the end of the day, they pitched their solution to a CEO panel, and their solution is an app that allows teens to remain anonymous while receiving scaffolded care. One of the CEO panelists, who happens to be a venture capitalist, said, "You should consider talking with local insurance companies about funding this because it would be a win win win. The insurance companies can ensure access to better care for their customers, which, enlightened self interest here saves them money over time. Also, the teenager in need will be able to address a disorder that's not only a physical health, but also a mental health burden. And the community will avoid suffering the loss of its youth and avoid the myriad problems that come with the spread of drugs." Now, for almost a decade, I've been facilitating this kind of social entrepreneurship design sprint, and I call them expeditions, hence the title of this moonshot idea, Expeditions for Everyone. And it's by far the best learning experience I've ever seen kids go through. They are intrinsically motivated by the social impact challenges that they get to select. They're socially motivated because they work in teams, and they're extrinsically motivated by the desire to impress the CEO panel and receive helpful feedback from them. But all those things were true before. So what was different this time? Well, obviously, we used generative AI, but what specifically about using generative AI made it different? Well, normally, these design sprints, these expeditions take 4 to 5 full days. But this time, we were able to accomplish everything in one day. So we got to the goal 75 to 80% faster. In addition, the students use generative AI in a number of ways. So, for example, they used it to do some divergent and convergent thinking at each stage of their problem framing and solution generation. And if you've studied design thinking, or if you've read the famous Harvard Business Review article on divergent and convergent thinking, then you know that it's a best practice for arriving at great solutions. Another thing that they used generative AI for was to get critical feedback on their prototypes. So they would design an idea and then they would ask the generative AI to point out flaws in their plan or things that they had overlooked and sometimes even options to address the gaps. Another thing that they used it for was to simulate the point of view of teenagers and parents and other community members about the problem and the solution. And finally, they used generative AI to create images for their pitch decks. This is an image that they found using thispersondoesnotexist.com. Yes, that's a real website. And it auto generates faces of people who are not real human beings, but it does a far better job than Midjourney or Dali. They also said, and this is a quote, "We found that generative AI cannot be used to fully create something for you in an effective manner. It is instead an analytical tool." So they were, I think, appropriately skeptical of using generative AI to do too much. And they may have left out the fact that it was a brainstorming tool as well. But I'm willing to give them credit for this one. So, what does all this have to do with an AI education moonshot? Well, I think kids should be doing this all the time in school. And with AI, we can finally shift to a version of school that's designed around the concept of practices and scrimmages and games. Now, the game that we should already be preparing students to play is contributing to the common good with their distinctive talents. Every school already has a mission statement that says, in some way, shape, or form, that their purpose is to form productive citizens or leaders or contributors to something bigger than themselves. And in my moonshot, I think of this as developing social entrepreneurs. Now, that's different from the straight up entrepreneurship notion that maybe is captured in the definition from Howard Stevenson from HBS, who said that it's the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. I think we can just slightly modify this to make entrepreneurship the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled on behalf of the common good. So, in the example from Greensboro Day School, those kids were playing their game by publicly demonstrating their learning to a CEO panel about how to frame a problem and how to solve it. Now, you couldn't see it, but in the audience were about 50 or 60 faculty and staff and parents and fellow students. And I can assure you that the students on that stage felt like the stakes were as high as they had ever been for those kids. And they had to prove something. They had to prove that they had learned something. With generative AI, that team of students could create a functioning app in less than a day, and they could pressure test their jobs to be done theories. They could design a marketing campaign. They could simulate user interactions. And if we gave those students more than just one day, they could form community partnerships and even set up a beta test pretty quickly. Now, the scrimmages in this model are multiple simulations of that game. So at Greensboro Day School, before the CEO panel, each team had to do 3 practice pitches to their fellow students and to me and my co-facilitator, Nicole. We all gave feedback, and the teams would then iterate on their design and then practice pitching again. So that when the time came for the CEO panel, yeah, they were definitely nervous because this was no longer a scrimmage at that point, but they felt prepared because of the scrimmaging. And finally, the practices in this moonshot consist of the work on the discrete skills and knowledge areas that connect with their projects. So, in just one day, the Greensboro Day students learned the basics of divergent and convergent thinking, of defining problems in a human centered way, of combining storytelling and data to pitch an idea, of demographics, in this case of the greater Greensboro region, and even of epidemiology, in this case of addiction in the greater Greensboro region. Now, with the help of generative AI, students can match the curriculum to their projects rather than the other way around. And that's a big deal because if we can use generative AI as educators to do lesson planning in real time around the projects, then these students can spend a week, a quarter, a semester, maybe even a whole year working on Recovering Teens Anonymous. They could easily use generative AI to pitch something and then put a working prototype out there into the real world. Meanwhile, as educators, we can develop daily practice sessions. Obviously, if you're looking at the screen, then you know that this is directly from AI for Education, um, in which they learn the necessary math and English and social studies and science and other required curriculum. And then we can use something like a mastery transcript to reflect the degrees of mastery that students are developing in those curriculum areas, those required curriculum areas that link to their projects. So, what makes this a moonshot? Well, imagine telling a kid every day you go to school, you get to work on a problem that matters to you with your friends so that you can have a positive social impact on the world. And you're still going to learn all the stuff you need to get into college. Now, maybe that's not for every kid, but ever since I started doing these expeditions in 2015, I've been asking participants about that possibility. What if you could do this every day? And every single time, students have answered with an enthusiastic yes. With generative AI, that future is possible. And God knows that the world needs it now more than ever. So let's make this happen.